Get going. Three of us met yesterday with the men's group in Cochrane that has been going on for a couple of years. It's called Man Up, Mark. Um, we just alternate locations every week, and it's a bunch of us guys that have been talking about this kind of stuff for the last couple of years, and we're starting to like organize some stuff to get out there and connect with and help other dudes in the same space. So that's where I know Joel from originally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ty joined us yesterday because one of our guys is considering Ayaboga journey. That it's like an African shit ass kicker, scrub brush
Kicking root.
ass
Yeah.
kicking root, or it's actually a bark. Yeah. But it's the event. Tyler had a transformational experience with that, and I wanted to connect them, so that's why he came. But we did have an interesting conversation about a couple things that, this is just a fireside chat. I know we didn't have a lot of consistency over the last couple of weeks, and so I think these meetings that I time every 3 or 4 sessions are just to, unpack maybe some of the stuff that we've covered, maybe give people a little bit more chance, if they were on some of those calls to, ask questions or dive deep or even share kind of experience. I'm sure some of us have been working on some of these elements one way or another in the last few months. So just giving people an opportunity to kind of share, what's been working for them, what hasn't, with a view to, that kind of information could be really helpful for others that are contemplating some of these things. So yeah, on that note, mate, why don't we even just start there? Like, I know, Joel, you've been on a few meetings. Ty, you've been, and you too, Mark, have been on quite a bit. I'm just curious if there's anything specific that you guys have been working on in the last few months that maybe aligns with one of these themes, and some interesting anecdotes or stories you might have that highlight any of these pieces.
I can go if you want.
Yeah, do it.
I started talking to Dan right before our meeting yesterday, and I guess this is as good a place as any to continue that we didn't get to finish there, Dan. But
Yeah.
it's been a bit around that, like, sitting with emotions not becoming emotions, I guess, letting them move through versus getting captured by them. And I don't know, it's like you go through these phases of life that just feel like a real grind. Like, where just a lot of stuff's just super, super hard. And I don't know, you just feel irritated and frustrated, and or at least this was what happened to me. And it was a good 2 month run of that. And it's like no amount, I was exhausted, like no amount of sleep was an antidote. Just nothing touched the exhaustion. My temper was getting shorter again, which is kind of older behavior that, I'd hoped I'd worked my way out of through these various tools for a while. There was a difference though, and leading up to this, I guess on the tail end and into the last 3 weeks, we lost a family member. My wife's grandma passed away, and my wife was very, very close with her. And she was 92 and lived a great life and had a very easy, peaceful death. And so it was more of a celebration than anything, but still sort of precipitated a bunch of tough stuff in the house. And then, so we had a funeral. We had a whole bunch of family back at our place right after that. And then the next week, I don't know if it was related to just all this crazy grief and heaviness and stuff that was around people, but also this kind of lightness and love and stuff, that comes with funerals when people reconnect after years of being separated. And then our whole house got hit with gastro, like just everybody was down at the same time, and it was ugly. Like, 2 kids going, my wife going, I'm going within a span of 4 or 5 days. And it just felt super intense and super grindy. I guess the difference this time for me is I have like an unreasonable fear of throwing up, not to get too graphic, like unreasonable fear of it. Like, just like, no, 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 I don't want this. I don't want this. And And it was, I guess it's been different, and it's been a lot about some of the discussion that we've had here and a lot of sort of the journey and stuff I've been on of just recognizing there's not a damn thing you can do about what's happening. You just sort of get to lean into what's happening, and the more you resist, the more you push away, sort of the harder it gets. And so I was kind of in that mode where, I'm suddenly doing the thing that sucks that I don't want to do and not resisting it. And so by some weird way that kind of made it better. You just kind of flow with it and it was like, okay, well, this is what it is. And you got through this period of sickness with much less sort of drama and trauma than I normally would have. And then what I saw was my daughter went through it. And like it was literally like watching like a little version of myself where that, that feeling starts to come and she's freaking out, like flipping her top, like just totally in her emotion, just everything's exploding out of like, no, no, screaming and uses the bucket and screaming more and just pushing it away so much. And then in between, I have this little chat with her, and I'm like, hey, look, kid, like, I know you don't want to, but here's the thing. The more you resist, the more you push away, the harder it gets. So next time it comes, just know that it's okay. You're going to be fine. You're safe. And we kind of have this little discussion. And then she kind of just slipped into this thing like little kids do. Then she was just sick and it wasn't a big issue. It wasn't a big dramatic thing. So I don't know, it's a gross example, guys, but it was kind of an example of just like flowing with what is versus pushing it away. And that's kind of become the model for my life lately. And then watching it and observing it in a child. So she's almost 10. And then seeing it in my little guy who's 6, who's just like an animal, just whatever happens, happens. And 2 seconds later, he wants to go play. Like, doesn't matter. So it was kind of interesting watching this dichotomy, and to me it was like this like layering of mind, and the more belief and the more conditioning you take on in your life, like the more you resist and the harder you push away. So that was an interesting experience. I don't know if that's relevant here, but
It's totally relevant. Like when life gets chaotic, that's when we need to use our.
yeah,
We talked about Joel's spiritual tools yesterday, and like spirituality being those tools we learn and take out into real life in order to kind of where it's really hard to apply them sometimes and see what we've actually learned and what we're able to do. So that like, yeah, surrender, acceptance, um, all of those elements in the example that you gave. I'm curious though, Ty, like you've expressed like the swallowing issue and then this fear of throwing up, and you've got some interesting throat related
yeah,
quirks.
Yes.
uh, weird deep stuff there, but
Yeah,
mostly resolved now. I'm happy to say, yeah, yeah.
right on. That's funny.
Yeah, but I would say that's the biggest thing that's resonated is just that understanding emotions and not getting captured by it, recognizing what it is and
Mm.
realizing what happens. And you can choose to go with it or not. And if you push against it, it sucks. And if you go with it, it
Yeah.
doesn't actually.
Yeah, it can still suck though, right? Like what did we talk about yesterday? I'll get right to you, Mark. I'm just gonna mention this. You'd kind of talked about like, our call it our subconscious kind of has these stories, has these patterns, these things that it's created mainly to keep us safe. Like that's its primary objective, right? And can filter kind of our conscious reality in many ways that we're aware of, maybe ways that we're not. And even if those parts are not good for us or what we would call, healthy, when you do let them go and lose them, you have that like intense grief almost at losing a part of yourself, even though it wasn't a part that you would be proud of or want to have if you had a choice. So I thought you were going to go there a little bit too, because I thought that was particularly interesting because it illustrates that yeah, sometimes this stuff's really hard and it still hurts and you just have to let that happen. Like no amount of tools or otherwise can avoid the work or sometimes some of the pain that comes with it.
I'll maybe cycle back to that after Mark
Yeah.
says.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Yeah. So Tyler, yeah, that's very familiar what you talked about there. And of course, most of us, myself for sure included, I've lived several episodes of that, and I've had time to live a lot more than you guys have. And I spent a lot of time trying to analyze them after the fact, as of just the most recent years. And so some of that stuff that you just described is very compounding, isn't it? So all of a sudden you have a few things occur in life. It seems like they're all happening at once. Now, for me, it may not be the same for everybody, but I think that one of the things that makes me stay off track longer than I should is self-judgment. So you can get disappointed in the fact that you may not be handling things quite right, like observing yourself going through these things, just being very reactive. And for myself, it would be an issue of I know that's the mistake I'm making, yet I would make the mistake. And so then you become very self-judging, which compounds your inner discontent, which causes you to do other shit that upsets the apple basket along the way within the next few days. So I think that we need to be careful when we're going through those things, even if we are going to reflect on it later and realize that we made some mistakes, not to be during the process judgmental with ourselves too much. Because I think that it's just like pouring grease on a rope you're trying to climb, and it's a real negative impact.
Well said, man. Yeah, I resonate strongly because this past couple of months, there for sure were times I wish I could have taken back where, for me that sometimes that comes out in the form of anger or impatience with your kids, right? And I always hate that. I thought I was over that hurdle and there it came. Hey? And yeah,
I hate it. Yeah, I hate it too, Tyler. And what really would accelerate that feeling for me is realizing hours or days later, even that I've either frightened be the people around me or my kids, or been a little unnecessarily assertive in certain directions because of my lack of ability to handle that. And as I said, very compound. And then you judge yourself, which pisses you off even further, and doesn't allow you to take the right step.
yeah, 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 100%, man. I appreciate you sharing that. It doesn't make me feel quite so isolated.
But you know what? Even I'm saying these things and I understand it, but I'm telling you right now, I'm going to make those same mistakes again. It's going to happen.
Absolutely. Welcome, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
How's it going, guys? Nice to meet you.
You as
I've
well.
met Mark, but I haven't met Joel and Tyler. So,
Hi, Sam.
good to see you guys.
Great, man. Good to have you.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, this is just a random fireside chat, Sam. So we're kind of just talking about, if there's things we've covered in the last several months that people are kind of implementing or otherwise thinking about or working on and curious about, personal experience that people may have had with some of these elements, and otherwise just what's going on in people's journeys in the last little while, and some things that maybe have been tough or have required that we take these tools to try to navigate this mundane life existence sometimes that throws us some curveballs and can get pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think Tyler's family just reenacted Stand By Me pie eating contest. Although I might date myself, Sam might have no idea what I'm talking about there. Do you know the movie Stand By Me?
I feel like you're talking about Robert Munch, but maybe I'm out of line.
No, Stand By Me is
No.
like a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, no.
And they made like a bad movie about it. And it wasn't bad when we were kids, I don't think, but there's a big pie eating contest and they put like, I don't know, castor oil or something in the big guy's pie. And anyway, he ended up like puking everywhere and it was a big puking contest, but a little off topic. Never mind. It's Tyler's fault.
Yeah, no, it's not my fault. Yeah. Well, I guess just to tie a bow around that story to finish what Mark was saying. Yeah, I mean, it was like I think like 3 days ago, it kind of felt like I got over that hump, like all that grit and that grind and that hard stuff and that weird anger that came up, and to the point where I said to my wife, I'm like, I don't even know who this is. Like, what is this? And a lot of it's been, Mark, you're probably familiar. I mean, I made a lot of changes in my life recently, signing on with the Lifecraft crew, and I've let a lot of my old identity I've had to release my grip on, of sort of what I thought to be true, what I accepted to be allowed in my sphere of reality. And it's been a sort of a gradual loosening of that and sort of a bit of a turning inward to some of the intuition and things that are sort of coming up more frequently as I learned to listen to that. And me 3 years ago would have laughed in my own face and said I was crazy and didn't belong here. But again, it's kind of the shedding of that identity, I think, comes with this grit is part of that. It's kind of letting that shit go and stepping into what you are, what you're becoming, what the world is calling you into. And it's been a lot of that, So an opening to this exploration comes with these waves of pretty intense, call them low points, but just grit. And yeah, but then you kind of come through the other side. And like I say, like 3 days ago, suddenly I'm just open again and things are flowing and my emotions are in check and I feel very much on top of things. And so it's just weird. It's just like this freight train came through and now it's gone. And I'm kind of left with the wisdom of whatever that was. No.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I wish this sort of awakening would have come to me when I was your age. I mean, it's you can put a lot of decades behind you battling some of this stuff, and I mean, it's all survivable, but having this base or foundation to understand it would sure have been a benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all wish we were as young as Sam. We can always wish younger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Kudos to you, Sam, for exploring this now. It's it'll serve you well.
And
Totally.
when you say exploring this, like what specifically are you alluding to?
I think like challenging times in your life and challenging what beliefs you hold, what's true. And kind of, I don't know, this is for me. I mean, the other guys can speak for themselves. It's challenging what I believe to be true, what I believe to be important, what I believe to be what I needed to do to be successful as a human and as a man. And it's been pretty confusing the last couple of decades for many of us, and especially in my generation, kind of caught between the old ways and the new ways, neither of which make complete sense, but both which have some merit. And just trying to find ourselves inside of all this. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain, honestly. And I do think life has to roast you a little bit to teach you the things you need to learn in order to open up to start shedding some of those beliefs. But I mean, it comes stages. I think if you have a foundation of understanding at the appropriate age, it helps you build on that as weird things start happening to you. So yeah.
Pretty good answer, Ty.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I would say that what we're doing is forgetting ourselves and getting to know life in a way. Like just stop getting in the way. Stop putting things in the way that don't exist, creating things that don't exist, liking things and not liking others, having preferences, fears, all these, like just stop getting in your way at the end of the day. It sounds easy, but it's definitely not. It's like Michael Singer 101. It's a big common theme throughout most of his work. That's what I feel that I'm doing or trying to do. Yeah.
And not being afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of groups. Yeah.
Yeah. Having that, what does Greg say? Unfuck with ability. Just be your authentic self unapologetically, and then you're like unfuckwithable. Yeah. I like that word. I'll make some t-shirts at some point. So do you remember G.S. Youngblood's masculine relationship? And I know you're familiar with the concept, Joel, whether you've read that book or not. Did you read that book though?
Yep. No, I never have.
But you know enough to write that book. But in any event, there's this one element, like, and Sam, for your benefit, this guy kind of just does a lot of self-reflection over his relationships and some research, and he's a fan of David Data and a few other these masculinity authors that talk about like healthy kind of polarity and what that needs to look like and blah blah blah. Anyway, he summarizes these three elements, this framework to how a man really needs to show up as a strong masculine in a relationship. If that's what the man obviously wants to be. It's not always the case. Sometimes there's polarities of masculine energy in the woman and feminine energy in the man. These aren't like sex based, they're energy based. But anyway, where you want to be that strong masculine man in a relationship, a big part of it is like creating safety, and what that really means, other than like financial and physical safety, which most people probably think about, is and holding space for like that powerful feminine energy to express itself, and basically like providing that loud and clear message, that it's safe to feel those emotions and it's safe to express those emotions, and that you're not going to like be a bitch about it, take it personally, start defending yourself, start hucking out facts and trying to clarify the facts. All of these things that men tend to do in their weakness, or just run away and like go work on the trailer or something, right? That there's that kind of behavior as well. And it sounds pretty simple, but I just went through about, she's thankfully in the shower, but in any event, like I'm talking like powerful feminine energy, and it's directed at you, man, because you're like there, right? And so anything that gets activated, it's like you energy, tears, laughter, it's like, what are you on? Like, it was just I've never seen anything like this. It was really, really interesting. And I'm just trying to stay chill. I'm like, it's okay, babe. Everything will be okay. No, you can, it's okay. I don't take these things personally. I can hold space. It's okay that you feel that way. No, you're not overreacting to the emotion, maybe the situation, but not the emotion. And like just holding that space. And after like 3-4 days of that, though, you're like, holy fuck, like, what is this ever going to work? Like, these things don't work. Yes, Youngblood's a liar. And, but then it's like the fever broke, and um and holy smokes, like the connection and safety and respect and closeness and everything on the other end um is outrageous. And so I think that was probably one of the most I've been tested in a long time, maybe because I probably wouldn't let myself get tested in previous relationships, but in this instance, I just like, yeah, I just went for it. It was really, really interesting. um but it took days. Like, I thought it would take like an hour. It took days. Yeah, it was really funny. Um, but interesting. Yeah, and it works, like, absolutely. But man, it's hard because so many times, like, some of the things that are like that energy is aimed at you, and you really want to like defend yourself, or things that are obviously like different in your recollection or in your factual remembrance of the circumstances. It's quite funny.
Do you find it the subject of boundaries kind of comes in to this, right? This is one of those places where it's like your mind wants to run to a boundary, but at the same time, that's actually not the answer in this case. Hey, like those can get confounded, and this might be an example of when those can be confounded. Hey,
Yeah, I guess if you're like running to a boundary just to kind of try to get
get
some
away.
padding, get some padding. Yeah, I don't know that it'll work very well, but absolutely, like, there's things sometimes that might come up in those situations, and it did, where I was like, hey, like that doesn't fly for me. Like, if you're gonna do that kind of thing. Um, and those are usually like in moments of weakness, like in intentions to hurt, right, or to do something of that nature. And I think in those instances, you do have to say, hey, like, I realize you're upset, but let's find some discernment here, like that line doesn't get crossed, right? um uh like, I don't need to give any examples. We've all been there. I'm guessing, maybe not you, Sam, yet, but you will be.
I think I think if I could expand on that
Yes.
more, I think like what you're talking about is kind of the tip of the iceberg. It's like, and life is no different. It's right. It's like once we achieve a certain level of mastery in a thing, whether it's being masculine or sitting in a masculine space, or creating that space of safety, it's like, or entering the world in a more present way from a masculine perspective. It's like, and David Data says this, the universe is a woman, right? So it's like, um, it doesn't matter how good you get at something, she can always turn around and go, oh yeah, what about this?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's always going to be a constant test all the time, and holding that space of safety. But I always I always like to remind men, because once we learn this stuff, it's like we can put ourselves into a space of um it's not it's I can't think of the right word, but essentially it's like we have to, in the moment when that energy is coming at us, self-reflect and see if that energy is actually for us or if that's actually her shit. So it's one of the two, right? It's always one of the two. And
Mm.
so in the moment when it starts to come at us, we reflect and go, okay, did my presence go somewhere else? Am I in a space of weakness? Am I trying to control? Am I trying to run away? And if the answer to that when you're diving deep in that moment is no, then it's usually her shit at that point, right? But and then that's when the boundaries come in. That's when it's important to lay the boundaries down, because we don't it's good for us to sit there and create that space of safety for her so that she feels safe in expressing that and that kind of energy. But also too, in relationships, usually for the first few years of a relationship, she's dragging out shit from all of her past relationships and she's dumping it into the middle of the relationship, right? And so it's almost to go back to the metaphor of vomiting, that's pretty much what it is, right? She's just blah blah blah, this stuff is coming out, but she needs to be able to clear that in
Yeah.
order for her to be able to reflect you accurately. To otherwise she's reflecting all these past experiences she's had, right? And she's seeing those things in you and they might not actually be true, right? So that's why it's important for us to reflect and give her that feedback. But to your comments about it being so many days, Dan, it's like when I'm coaching men, what I like to say to them is feminism taught women how to be men, how to be more masculine, right? And so they are able to do everything for themselves that men traditional gender roles, could would bring to the relationship. Right now, women can do that for themselves to a large degree. They can make money, they can pay the bills, they can handle all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that feminine people will never be able to do is break themselves out of a pattern when they're stuck in it, an emotional pattern. They can't do that for themselves, right? So one of the objects of being able to hold that space and know whether it's yours or not is that you can enter it with presence and then break the state if she's stuck in a state, right? Which happens a lot.
Mhm.
And so it might not have to take 4 days if you step in with full presence, and then you can break the state, but not from a problem solving point of view, because that'll just get you more fire, but from a loving point of view, right? From a presence point of view. So how do you step into it with full presence and then follow the intuitive nudges that come back at you in that space? As David Data would say, you step into presence by saying, who do I need to be right now to be fully present to her in this situation? And as soon as you do that, you're present. You can't help but be present when you ask yourself that question. But whatever comes up intuitively, follow that nudge, even if it seems totally ridiculous in the moment. Like, follow that nudge. And you're acting from a place of pure presence to her because you're coming from love, right?
Mhm.
And you're not coming from a problem solving place. And so you might have been able to break that. You might have been able to break that stuckness sooner than 4 days, Dan, potentially.
Mhm.
You might not have had to sit with it for 4 days, but
Yeah, that all makes
hey,
great sense. 4 days is a long time, though.
it is.
Greg's not on here yet, is he?
Nope. Nope.
I'll just go ahead and say then the longer it takes, the better the makeup sex.
Well, that's part of it too, right? As an elder I used to know in the Yukon said, he's like, after you have a big fight with your partner, he's like, did you go home and give her a forgiven? She'll never forget. That always used to make me laugh.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's important to know, like, holding that space is important, but it's not good to be abused in that space if you can help it. So if it's her stuff and it's going ouch, 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 then that's, to your point, Tyler, that's when the boundaries are super important, right? when you start to feel that kind of abusive energy coming out. And then it's good to in the moment just reflect, is that me or not me? Is that about me? Because in the moment when she's being emotional, it's always about your presence generally, whether your presence is left or is there.
Mhm.
So what I'm curious about is the everything you talked about. It makes great sense to me. But so you get to the end of that phase. So it's the end of 4 days with Dan or end of 1 day with somebody else. What's learned by the feminine at that point for the next time? Like, how is there an acknowledgement of a lesson, not just for you because it took you the 4 days to practice what you know you had to, but what is discussed? How's it, how what's the general way to properly acknowledge after it's all settled out? What are we going to do next time as a couple?
Well, I would say it's individual. So the point of both of those, the point of that whole thing happening is for us men to learn how to be more present and hold that space. But her side of the equation is to step into that openness with as much courage as you're stepping into the presence, right? And so that's the lesson each time. So if you're gonna, I think I'd say if you're gonna reflect back and debrief backwards, it's about, you know, how effectively you stepped into that space of presence with her. How safe did she feel in that space? But also it's like it's not we're not in there just to sacrifice ourselves. It's like the whole point of stepping into there, the whole point of stepping into that space with her is so that she can have the capacity to open up more fully to us, right? And so if you reflect after that situation and she continues to be closed down and continues to not be open fully, then there's work on her side so that there's reflection on both sides. So it's less about a logical a therapy kind of a space, because in a therapy kind of a space, that's a masculine space and a problem solving space. So it's more about how do you step into the space of offering each other, you know, what you've learned from that experience, whatever happened. And from her perspective, it would be learning how to be more open, be more courageous in expressing the full spectrum of her energy, not just her anger, you know, or her dark, like feminine people tend to go to the anger side of the spectrum because it's the easiest to express. There's the least risk in expressing anger, right? Plus, plus a lot of them, their core emotional state is anger a lot of the times, but it's easier for them to express. There's less risk. They don't have to be as courageous. Anger is easy. I guess it's the same for men. When we're in an emotional place, like anger is the easiest for us to express too, right?
Why do you say less risk? Like less risk being misunderstood or?
Less risk of being rejected for who you really are at your spirit and at your core.
Okay.
So for feminine people, they have just as much fear of stepping into their authenticity as men do. Like we have a lot of fear of stepping into our authenticity, right? And stepping into that space of full presence. Like it's difficult for us. That's always our edge. Our edge is always in that stepping into full presence. But if she's blasting energy at you and that's why you reject her, then she can go, well, he rejected me because of the anger. Like, but if she's in a space of love and opening to you and then you reject her, ooh, that's like a knife to the heart, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It's totally different space. It's more risk for her. But we have to allow all of it to wash over us to get the good stuff, right? That we actually want from our partner, that openness, that love, the whatever it is that comes, like the full spectrum of energy. So that's why it's important to create that space of safety for her.
Mm. Yeah.
It's the yin yang, right? Where you can't have one without the other. The emotions and energy pulls our presence, but our presence allows for that greater emotion and energy. So it's like they open each other up. They, you know, yeah.
Hmm.
Presence and light is to go to the yogic concept, right? It's like consciousness and light essentially is what it is. And
Mhm.
in the end, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for that, Joel.
Yeah.
It is helpful.
Yeah, so take it a step further. So it is important, I think, for men to learn what it feels like to hold that space, because a lot of us don't know what that feels like at all, because most of us are trying to escape it in some way or another when it's happening. So for me, when I first started learning this stuff, there's a lot of testing in that regard, especially if you're with a new partner or even with an old partner. Once you start to learn this stuff, she'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to test and see if this is really real, right? I'm going to test and see if, you know, but once we learn what it feels like to hold that space and not crumble in that space, then it becomes more fun, because then you can start to dance, you can start to play.
yeah.
So if she is in a moment where she's stuck, you can, like, if you're in a moment of full presence, like, you can do something that seems utterly ridiculous and it'll instantly break her state. Boom. And she's somewhere else, right?
Mhm.
She can go from like spitting mad at you to like you're the best person in the world.
Magic.
But that's not why you do it though. Because if that's why you do it, then you'll never get that.
Nice.
Too funny.
Yeah.
Maybe we test too, and we throw like an extra log on there once in a while just to see how much we can take.
Yeah.
Strategy.
Well, the thing is that if you're doing that, like once you get proficient enough and you do that, that'll also do the same thing. It'll also break her straight, because she'll know you're doing it because you know. Does that make sense? It's almost like you're punking her, and she'll be like, "Oh, that asshole, he actually knows. He actually does know, right?"
Punked.
Yeah, but in a way, that's like you're not running away. You're not trying to control. It's like, oh yeah, I give me more of this. Give me more of it,
Yeah,
right?
too funny.
Yeah.
Sam, you learning a shit ton?
Yeah, I'm just happy to be a fly on the wall, to be honest, just kind of learning. And you guys are kind of almost giving me an outline as to what to expect in the future. Like, I have been in a few longer term relationships, but marriage is a whole nother animal, and you're now with that person for years on end, and it's definitely exciting, and the phase of life I'm in is exciting too. But it's just, I really embody, I was saying this to, I think I said this last time, I embody like a being the worst in the room kind of mindset, being like open to learning from people who have more experience than me, and that's why I'm happy to be here.
I don't know. In my work, I'm an executive director, and when I started, I used to say that's actually a really good leadership quality, what you just stated there. I used to sit in meetings and I would say, you know what, you're the experts in the room, so you need to share with me, because I have no idea. I can only make decisions if all of you experts in the room,
Yeah,
give me the information I need to be. I'm fine with being the guy where the buck stops, but I need all of you that you're the ones that are making it all happen, not me. So that's a good leadership quality, to sit there and listen to the experts in the room and then distill that down and decide what to do with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Socrates 101.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Cool, man. What's been going on in your life, Sam? How are things going for you?
Yeah, things have been really well. Like, I don't know if you're all from Cochrane, I think, right? So I don't know if you all know Marla Bosch, but anyway, so I was at the Novak's house, Dad. You know Jill, and this was on December 22nd. I can vividly remember it. Her and I start talking, and it was like small talk at the start, and then she read me so well. She's like, I can tell you are in a position where you want to be the person you know you can be, but you keep hitting that same roadblock and that same wall. And she's the one who opened my mind to like spirituality and kind of more than just myself, and kind of differentiating between like my ego and myself, and realizing that when you are in an unfuckwithable state, as you guys like to say, that's when you're going to be guided by the universe, and I'm just kind of learning more and more how to kind of attune myself with the universe and kind of align myself so that I can go through life with ease and kind of on a path I'm meant to be on.
Nice. Good for you, buddy. Yep, wish I knew that 20 years ago.
Right. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, but it might be, yeah, it's a true path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is refreshing to see young people
Yeah.
getting on board with that early in life. It'll help a lot.
Yeah. Agreed.
Absolutely. I agree.
Mm-hmm. You
What
know,
else did we cover, Dan?
Pardon me?
What else did we cover? I'm trying to spin my
Yesterday?
wheels. In your previous webinars, we did GS Youngblood. We did
Yeah, we did like Eros, like living an erotic life with
Power
Eros.
versus Force,
We
right?
did the chakras as well. Yeah, Joel, like Eros, I think you'd appreciate. It's a lot like living life like through Tantra in many ways, like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
presence and that interiority and that yeah, basically like fully surrendering to experiences with that with those qualities that are easy to understand when you think about sex, but it's like it just models that, doesn't exhaust it, right? In a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan, something I sit here thinking about from time to time is I wasn't involved. I don't believe in, I missed a lot of the earlier sessions. And so now I'm looking at like young people like Sam and you, Tyler. So something that I wonder is I hear and understand the concepts that we just discussed today regarding handling yourself through some of these difficult situations and learning and being prepared. But were there any discussions early on regarding a foundation of different aspects of where you work, how you're living your life, and how that can affect how you handle these things? The reason I say that is this: what I've watched within about the last 40 years, which sounds like a long time to you, Sam, but so I worked for about 32 years for a major oil company, Imperial Oil. And here's what I saw with the pendulum swinging around. So at the start of the late 70s, early 80s, people were really rewarded for thinking on their own and coming forward with good ideas to improve the operation and to be team players and such. And that worked well, and I watched people thrive with that. And while people were thriving with that, I have to imagine that they felt empowered going home for their home life too. And then when ExxonMobil got their meat hooks into us a little more up here in Canada, I was involved. I was what you would, I suppose, consider in these days as a middle management position. So taking it from below and above, sort of a thing. There was a period of time where rather than allow the employees and even people in my position to use our own gray matter to feel efficient and be efficient, there became the best practices. And I sat in meetings for a week straight outlining best practices for the entire operation of Imperial Oil and ExxonMobil, only to find out that the ones that we'd identified that would be beneficial to the entire organization got thrown in the garbage because ExxonMobil said there's just too many other people and other operations. And so to adapt what works great in Canada doesn't work good. So then people were doing functions at work that we had to do to follow ExxonMobil's instructions with everything from how we ran contracts to how work was done. It made people feel they no longer were supposed to be using their own initiatives and brain power. And I think that has a huge potential to bleed into how you handle your relationships if you're exposed to that day in and day out at work. Some men and women probably, but I watched some men kind of feel like they were beat down to a point where I think their home life was affected by that too. they weren't able to make their own decisions all day at work properly, to a certain degree. And I think that follows you. So,
Mm.
I guess this long-winded thing I'm saying is maybe be quite selective as what you choose as a career if you can't handle that type of a scenario. Is that making any sense to anybody?
Yeah, a
Totally.
lot of that makes sense. A lot
One
of that
thing
makes
that one of our men's night guys, Peter, what he talks about a lot is like preserving your energy, like the energy that you need. You should never be giving your energy away is basically how he talks about it. And so I think what you're touching on there, Mark, is there's situations in life where if you're like super annoyed and frustrated and giving a lot of that energy away because of the circumstances that you're in, that should be a pretty big red flag that you need to mitigate those instances in your life where you're just not going to have anything left. And so certainly that would affect your ability to show up in your relationship and in many other aspects of life as well. Because we don't want to be giving our energy away. It's no differently than a bully. They're trying to take people's energy by strong arming them and bullying them. It's the same idea. You don't give that energy away. You got to save it for yourself, so that you can show up as your best self. So that's what it sounded like you were touching on to me.
Yeah, I saw that a lot myself, Mark, and even nowadays. I mean, so we had a small company. Ours was a private company, so nimble, and we could make decisions real time, and people could have, gray areas around their roles and really be creative and do cool stuff. And so it was really empowering. On the other side of the fence, anything that got over an intermediate sized company and into a lot of corporate structure, a lot of hierarchy, a lot of layers, the boxes started to get formed. And one of the like most prevalent places I saw this was under the board, like AER or ERCB or whatever they're called nowadays. In the board, they have to work inside of these black boxes. And if anything falls outside of that black line, it's like, nope, nope, can't do that. And so it takes away autonomy, it takes away your ability to be creative. It takes away your ability to think outside the box or interact with people or like help somebody solve a problem with, that you can't solve inside of a box because boxes can solve very few problems. And it just frustrates you. And I think that disempowerment comes home with you. And I saw a lot of disgruntled people in that space. And
Exactly. I mean, I think I survived it okay, but I watched a lot of friends and coworkers suffer with it.
yeah, and then you bring it home, and it either comes home as a form of continued disempowerment or as like overcompensation, um, trying to take control of what you can in your life and exert over control, like kind of go overboard in your personal life.
Exactly. I think the overcompensation is more dangerous than the other part of it.
I agree. Yeah, and we talked last night a bit about like anxiety and all that stuff that bubbles up. Like anxiety is such an amazing North Star that we usually numb with whatever we need to numb it with to get rid of it because we got to pay the bills and we got to go to work and we got to make life happen. But it's that like loud internal calling that hey, like something's wrong here, and having the courage to make change. To your point, it's tough, and it's tough to try to find your way. But I always feel like it's a nudge somewhere, whether it's in the same job elsewhere, whether it's showing up to your job differently despite the constraints that you're supposed to work in and just showing up authentically, which I've also seen. And those people end up becoming managers or something or directors inside of those companies that you're supposed to stay inside the box of. The people that break the molds tend to be the people who rise up sometimes.
Yeah.
Or you end up somewhere else. Yeah, I've always seen that, and it's like a forced victimization almost, where if you're not working in your power, yeah, your life just sort of like spins around on neutral.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like what you're describing, Mark, is why I decided to start my own business to start with, is because of those kind of structures were starting to get implemented. It's like if I think about the way business was when I first started going to work, I'm 54, so quite a while ago. And then when you saw that happening with the mergers and everything of larger corporations coming from elsewhere, it's almost like, in my in my learning over the years, there's kind of two paths, right? We can serve other people or we can serve ourselves. And so anytime you see an organization become really strictly hierarchical, it's more about power than it is about people. So it's like that's a power structure that, to Dan's point, takes energy and pushes it upwards towards whoever's up at the top of the structure, right? And so anyone who's in the middle of those power structures will have their energy taken away, and they lose that, you know, to your point, Tyler, they lose that autonomy, they lose that kind of creativity, because you don't have the ability, that always flows upwards. Somebody else always takes it away from you, right? Somebody else will always take credit for it. And then it goes up to the very top. The CEO is like, yeah, look what I did, look what we did, right? So your life force energy essentially gets pulled out of you, you know, because you're kind of forced to be in this structure. And yeah, we bring it home, right? Um, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Daniel Pink. Have you heard of Daniel Pink at all? He wrote a book called A Whole New Mind, which was really good, but there's a YouTube video of him. It's where he's talking about what's called the candle problem. It's really good. If you should watch it if you haven't seen it. So he talks about how what motivates human beings, and these are actual scientific studies they did with, it's called the candle problem, where they give people a little box, some tacks and a candle, and you have to figure out how to, I think, attach that to the wall or something. I can't remember what the actual problem is. And then with one group, they just gave them this stuff and said, solve this problem. And then the second group, they said, if you solve this problem, we'll give you X reward. And then the third group, they said, we'll give you money if you solve this problem within a certain amount of time or something like that. And the group that had the highest reward performed the least, were the least successful. So it was, and scientists were like, what the hell's going on? Like that, because theoretically in business, it's like, okay, if we offer people more money, they'll perform better. If we offer them better rewards, they'll perform better. But they found that the inverse was actually true. The more rewards and money you give to somebody, the less creative they are, the less they're able to solve problems.
Mhm.
And so he lands at a space where he says, what's important in businesses and in people's lives is three things: autonomy, mastery of a skill, and purpose of some kind. So autonomy, mastery, purpose. You know, so Mark, when I hear you talking, you know, how it used to be before Exxon came in, it sounded like, you know, you had this collaborative thing, you had that autonomy, you had that, you were doing better stuff, you were mastering some skills, you were learning how to do things better, and you had a purpose, right? As a small organization. And then as soon as you bring in this larger one and plop down these hierarchical structures, then you lose that autonomy, you lose the ability to have mastery, because you're stuck in your little box, you know. To Tyler's point, it's like you're over here and you got your manager and you're stuck in your little box and you can't really do much with that. And you take that home, you know, and you don't have autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your life, then you're going to take that home, take out those frustrations on your partners, on your kids, on your families, on your friends, even, you know. So
I've always wondered then, like guys, like, you know, because I've been in middle management too, Mark, and from above and from below sounds familiar. And it's
yeah,
like, so how, you know, how do you solve this problem? How do you step into a role that allows you to help people be in their full expression and still retain yourself, retain your own humanity, right? It's a tricky balancing act, and I mean, it's the reality of the world. I mean, corporations aren't going anywhere probably for a little while. So like, I don't know, you know, how do you navigate that as in this world? I don't
yeah,
know. But
yeah. I found it difficult. Like the last, not the current job I'm in, the last job I was in, um, the organization was pretty flat when I started in there, and then they hired a new CEO, they hired a new VP, and they shifted the organization to be super hierarchical. And I found as a director, I was shielding my team constantly from that. And it became quite the grind. Like it was really hard to stay, I guess, stay centered and stay, you know, ethically in my space. And I did my best to keep my team flat and keep them as, you know, creative and give them that space. But ultimately it was quite difficult. So I had to end up leaving to, I mean, to stay in my integrity, I had to leave, right?
Yeah, it's tough,
thing-
Tyler. So
yeah.
to answer your question, what I started doing just the last few years was discussions with employees around there still was the ability within the boxes we speak of to have people feel that they were contributing and utilizing their skill set, but within their own pasture, within their own guidelines. And the discussions I started having with people was that if you want to hang in there with this job, consider that here are our boundaries. You can maneuver within the boundaries and show your abilities and try to get self satisfaction. And if you can, and you find that to be palatable, what you do then is you value even more your space at home, your private time. That with it doesn't matter whether it's your own interests, your family, your sports, you're fixing up a car, you value that more. You say that now your job, you're doing the best you can with it until something else came along. However, it becomes a means to support the rest of your life where you're spending even more time and valuing the rest of your life even more to be in more control in the rest of your life. So your job is a means. You can't stay there if you absolutely hate it and it's draining you and it's torturing you to death. But if you can convince people that there is value there and they believe there is in their own minds and know there is, as I said, then they can reprioritize their own life and say, that's where the bigger picture is in my private life, not at work. And what I noticed that did with people is they no longer thought, I need to be a foreman or a superintendent within 10 years. They started just being people at work instead of trying to climb this ladder. I mean, I was like that when I first started. And as I got to the top of that ladder, I remember thinking, shit, I liked it down there better. But it took that unnecessary drive out of people, some of those discussions, and they started valuing their home life more.
Cool approach. I like that. Well said too. Yeah. And I mean, having a good leader is all the difference in a company. Like, yeah, your job doesn't have to be massively expansive CEO level. And yeah, maybe your advancement opportunities might not necessarily be there. But if you've got a great boss, man, coming to work is so much easier, even within the box. So yeah, I think that's well put. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's just making sure the boss is looking after themselves. And that's what I've always found to be the tricky part.
Totally, boys. We only have a couple minutes left, so I don't want to jump onto a new topic.
Cool.
But that is a good
Great,
one.
guys.
And I just wrote in the chat, like, sometimes things are really not aligned, like what you said, Joel, at your last organization, and things eventually just got to a point where it was just not working for you. It's shocking how often I speak to people that whatever they're doing is just not working for them, and they'd rather eat crow with the familiar than step into that unfamiliar territory. And it's so easy to say no to. And I know, Sam, you're close to innovation, and it's the same thing in companies, like just that the risk in saying no is far less than saying yes. And a lot of people are just too afraid to make that leap or to change things the way that they've always been done, or that the way they've always done them. And yeah, it's a downward spiral.
I was gonna say, to the point earlier about Mark, you had mentioned kind of losing the autonomy, losing your sense of self. Tyler, you alluded to that as well. That's actually, so you guys talked about that in a business standpoint, but the work that I'm doing is I do that in high schools. So I go like speak to schools, and kind of my core message, like the one thing I want them to take away, is that the knowledge and the power that they have in being the author of their own story. So giving up that power to someone else, losing your alignment for something that doesn't align with you, it's going to lead to you losing your power and not being as fulfilled. Whereas if you make that hard decision, as you talk about, Dan, doing the calling that maybe it's unfamiliar, but it's what you're meant to do, it's ultimately more fulfilling and what you're supposed to do.
I love it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
What
a great way to close the meeting. Our youngest and wisest attendee.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love that you're talking to high schools too. That's super awesome.
Yes, that's awesome.
I did watch your YouTube presentation that you sent me. I can share it with the guys in the chat as well. Right on, guys. Well, yeah, thanks for being here, Mark and Ty and Joel and Sam, and we'll pick this up again next week. What am I doing next week? I can't even remember. Do you remember, Ty?
Or on
Empathy? Wasn't it empathy? Unless you
That was
ditched
last
one.
week, but I'm gonna cycle that to the end. Might be
some
attachment
theory
styles.
attachment. That's it.
Attachment styles, yeah.
Attachment styles. Yes.
We're gonna have a fun chat.
Oh,
Yeah, you'll
fun.
attachment theory. Yeah, you'll like that, Joel.
yeah, yeah. I dive into that. Yep.
Right on, guys. Well, yeah, have a great week, great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, gents. Good to see y'all.
Yeah, nice to meet
All
you
See you,
guys.
boys.
Take it easy.